Hello everybody, mesdames, messieurs, dear colleagues. Thank you for being here physically, or thank you for the people that are watching the live stream, or this will be on replay as well. I'm very happy to launch the first Rocklines events, this seminar. Le syndicat ProSud, donc, and our main project, the Minute UNESCO Biosphere, is starting this new summer project, even it doesn't feel really like summer at the moment. The Man and Biosphere is an international interdisciplinary scientific program, and because the Man and Biosphere is the interaction between human and our environment, we thought that geography and geopoetic was very the niche project for us. I would like particularly to thank the Ministère de l'Aménagement du Territoire, who is supporting this initiative, and as well the Commission pour la coopération avec l'UNESCO, la Commission luxembourgeoise, et the municipalities of ProSud. We have a series of events starting with the seminar today, and for 3 weeks we have the famous Italian geopoet, David Sapienza, that will start the seminar, followed up by 2 geographers, researchers at the University of Luxembourg, Lise Landrin and Estelle Evrard. So I will now give space to David to start to introduce what is geopoetic, and then we're gonna continue with the geography in emotion.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here, and it's quite very emotional to be here for me because we have been working on this project for 1 year now, roughly, and I think this seminar is quite important to explain what we are all about, and with this contribution that we're going to have from Lise and Estelle, I think it can widen the horizons. I have prepared a paper, that is mostly taken from my latest book, and with some changes and a new idea of geography moving. But I want to read you a few lines of my idea of geopoetics. It's an idea about a practice. It's like in Zen. It's really difficult to define something, or like Saint Augustine said, if you ask me what the time is, I know what it is, but if you ask me to define time, I can't. So this is very, it's got a lot to do with the emotional side of us and the way we perceive things. And we understand that all these many fragments of reality that we have are trying, through the idea of the geopoetic practice, to recompose the creative, inspiration and the kinetic intuition of every living being who practices geography. Geography for the ancient Greeks meant the writing of the earth. So we have this big book. And it was Kenneth White, a Scottish philosopher, who coined the word geopoetic. The importance of a theory that must hinge on a fundamental thought, must be linked to sound practice, and must remain open. And this is why it is not a scientific practice, of course. For me, this practice is also the awareness of the large space of geopoetics. So it's something we should explore, And so this is what I have prepared for us. Geography moves. From our perceptions to knowledge, it is quite a long walk. In a walk that I started to realize and practice. In that, long ago, I realized how geography speaks to us with the language of freedom and the language of truth. Everything we are, the shapes we see, the shapes we are, it all comes from geography. Because geography, before being the all-inclusive science, taught me that geography is somehow dangerous. It is dangerous because geography does not lie. Geography sets us free. It's the free ticket to explore the world at large and, by reflection, the world inside us, and not the other way around. We assess a landscape according to our psyche and culture, but our innerscapes are literally crafted by the geography around us, in which we grow and then live, travel, dwell. Our perceptions, emotions, and thoughts are the endless becoming, the continued reckoning of our lives carried out with the inner compass inscribed in our restless human DNA. Geography. It is the living proof that we can discover and acknowledge a stronger tie, the connection, with everything around us. And the proof that everything around us, just like each human, is simultaneously at the center and interconnected with everything else. I cannot exist without the geography around me. That's important. Because I'm part of that. And geography does not exist without us, who recognize its call and the power to move us. Today we are here as a part of a peculiar geography, a project rooted on the idea of discovering and exploring opportunities. And we can do that by being part of that intimate geography, as the late Barry Lopez wrote. Geography, some scholars believe, has subtly but directly influenced the development of our cultures, our languages, our diets, our social organization, and to some degree, even our politics. Whenever I travel in remote places, I'm often conscious of watching for something modern man might have misplaced on his way from Altamira to Rome. Specifically, the understanding that geography was central to any idea of destiny. Once, I can easily imagine, we each had a fundamental sense of well-being that grew directly out of our intimacy, our back and forth, with the profundity embedded in the places we occupied. And this is why I want to quote Barry, because I think it has a lot to do with the Minette, La Minette, and Rocklines as a project. So this wonderful art, science, or both of them, that we call geography, is a key word that the ancient Greek gave us, and that means the description and representation of the earth. But now, as the earth is at the center of everything, this is where I approach the geographic self through a poetic perception, and therefore a creative process. In fact, geography is the oldest writing of our planet, the real Esperanto language that anyone at any given latitude was given the chance to try and get to know in order to survive. It is the land's true language, a landscape we have modified, living in it, speaking that same idiom that taught us everything we know. We have listened and we have learned making it our own for thousands and thousands of years. It is the widespread writing that the living creatures traveling on the earth and the seas used to connect rivers, mountains, plains, promontories, valleys, highlands, canyons, deserts. In the same fashion, we connect nouns, verbs, adjectives, conjunctions, adverbs. And this we do to convey emotions, thoughts, ideas, and theories. This is how, literally scanning new narratives sewn together through our stories, discoveries, and doubts, we have proceeded until now. The chapters of this book were written in an incredibly long span of time and formed the great volumes we started to write since the beginning of human life. But we are now facing a turning point in history. Being the storytellers, we must establish if we can accept to live without the great book of geography, and consequently give up the awareness of being in a relationship with our habitats, landscapes, and the universe. So we need to reconnect. It is our responsibility to decide if we can progress in the long run. Should we give up those nouns, verbs, adjectives, syllables that the earth, the very source of this writing, is offering to our sensory, emotional, and intellectual dictionary? The consumption of the planet's resources is a reckless act because it equals the consumption of these scriptures. These scriptures will eventually survive us, but we will not. Becoming such techno-illiterates, incapable to explain the reasons of our actions, and so close to the end of history as we know it, we don't have a real choice. We need to be moved by geography, and we need to become the lines of the poem. In our case, the rock lines. Altering geography, overwriting on his message with our unbearable and aimless noise, is like giving up being human enough to play our role in the Earth community. Do we really want to give up that network of environmental relationships and connections we learn to describe and interpret in the course of thousands of years? Let us not disown the synapses, the communication apparatus of the great human nervous system that led us here. Let us not disown the opportunity to replicate the web of life. The amazing and complex system we call geography, to me, is first and foremost a poetic vision. Before being even coded as a scientific apparatus that helped to spawn knowledge and connect the world before our eyes, everything was already connected. We just did not know. We just didn't have names for it. And then the poetic spark. The spark that inspired the ancient ones. Through the aesthetic experience of beholding and appreciating the landscape, we made the difference. Like rocks, rivers, trees, and other animals, geography evolves. Geography becomes. Geography moves. And it moves in both directions. It moves because it changes. But geography moves because it hits our emotional apparatus before anything else. It goes right there at the core of our being, and it moves us. It moves our emotions, and in doing so, it moves our bodies, spurring to explore and acquire knowledge. Geography moves because, like the river, it flows endlessly, and beyond the horizon we see moving ahead of us. Geography is the most inexhaustible source of knowledge and interpretation of life. We do need this planetary writing in order to keep at the forefront each microcosm that represents a bigger one. There is the place where our greater community dwells. Geography is not theory. Our ancestors knew each little recess of their landscape, and they lived in it, contributing to the changes. They knew the context. They contributed to its moves. And since the early rudimentary maps drawn on skins and on papyrus, cartography configured itself as a core element for the development of all civilizations. As a branch of geography, cartography was defined as such in the first half of the 19th century, and it is at the origin of the current shape of nations, land management, and development. Cartography explains why we are where we are, but it can never transcend from the larger context we call geography. Why are we here? Where do we come from? Who are we? What kind of effect has our presence on Earth? The vision we have of our being and what is all around us is directly connected with our intimate geography. The ability to translate reality into a narrative since the early days of the human adventure has been the key to survival. With the name Geographia, the ancient Greeks gave mankind the legacy of the poem's introduction, the writing of the earth. They meant that geography exists beyond us, and in time, this perpetual process manifested itself through a variety of creative modes: poetry, music, painting, sculpture, cinema, photography, writing. It all came from the creative spark, so unique to humans. If what we call poetic is a structured unity of the expressive intentions and goals of the artist contents that he needs to affirm, in the same way geography is a metamorphosis. Therefore, the poetic and the geographic element reflect the cycle of life. These are two sides of the same coin. The writing of the earth can only speak the truth. That is its mythological mandate. If you take our ways of communication, trails, roads, the elusive routes we establish by sea or by air, once forgotten, they remain engraved in the geography and linger on in the shape of memory, the spine of our continued storytelling. And this narrative is a charming practice because it demands powers of observation, perception, willingness to walk the world and let ourselves abandon our prejudice, implying our physical involvement inside the geography, our creative being in geography, in the here and now. That is the geopoetic practice. The connection with geography is the most evolved form of protection we can get for ourselves. There is no fortuity in the defiant will to surgically act right on the deepest psychic relationships with the land. Given the tight interconnection between these and our individual and collective intimate geography, to sever this tie, to unpack the knowledge and put it into boxes grouped by labels is like preventing the emotional experience with the landscape. And it is the symptom of the dangerous detachment from our great poem. The Cartesian ambivalence of this dualism made us believe we can live in the geography of our brain as if we did not have a physical geography. That same earth that is also our body and of which we are its shapes, and which is also our true cognitive context. To prevent the emotional experience, severing the deep communication with the land, and to take it to a merely mental level as an abstract pattern prevents the exploration of the infinite connections between the elements it contains. The lack of an emotional link leaves free ground to those who assault, harass, rape our Mother Earth, to which we belong. As a society, to not perceive this violence for what it is another way to submit to the Bibles of consumption. This is why ecology is a spiritual act. It comes from the basic act of life, respiro ergo sum, I breathe, therefore I am, and not cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. How can I think if I do not breathe? It is the education of our perception, ecology. Life is not a plot unfolding like the line from a spool of thread, but a principle made of connection and synchronic mechanisms. The events in our psyche do not know a linear and abstract chronology, but a cycle made of arrhythmia. It is in the spaces among events that we can be the flow of energy, to clearly see why life is not a private question between humans and the universe. There is no other creature on this planet, not a rock, not a plant, not a river, not a winged one, not a fish, complying with the artificial mandate of the linear order, which is just a human projection. And the greatest proof of what I'm saying is geography in motion. Today, I observe and absorb events that I might be able to understand in 3 or 20 years, but in the moment I can catch the fleeting vision. I can create paragraphs and stories, gathering the words from the rapture established to translate the writing of the earth into the poetic vision we all possess. I can write down the lines, our rock lines, to heed the call. I can feel its essence expanding and finally turn into a narrative. It is our cerebral photosynthesis, a process stemming from the emotional experience and going through the synapses until it becomes a form of temporary but solid enough knowledge to endure its freshness and lead me through the next experience. Why? Because geography moves us, while moving itself. In Zen, they say that the master appears when the student is ready, and that is precisely what geography did to me. It is in our psyche that we recognize the ways of communication, and when we understand the principle of the interconnection between the elements, our being the flow, of which we are part. These are the geopoet's lines, the act of creation, just like any element in the physical geography that becomes the something defining a landscape. To write is only one stage in the walk towards the awareness of being part of it all. The very act of writing proceeds dealing with the topography recorded by our psyche along the way. Writing is a physical act, and it is like plowing. We have the seeds to entrust it to the earth, the seeds to cover and to care for, signing our deal with that same life that gave birth to us. But before we do this, these seeds must be intercepted from the breeze, lulling them, and that our perception, our sixth sense can grasp. Without listening, without the silence, that is the meditation of the universe, it will be hard to catch that light filtering through the breeze. Why then give up the defining web of human connection that are part of the great Earth community? So for us who write, what we do should mirror the will to go to the whole root of our primitive self, the way along which the world of the wild can be reborn every day. We can do this with geography, the human vehicle with the astonishing power, the perfect science, the truth and revelation stimulating the seeker who boldly explores, trusting the finer tunings and the hidden notes, the awareness of the relationship between the landscape and our innate geography. Alexander von Humboldt, the great one, very well summed this up in his Naturgemälde, image and concept, and he said, poetry was necessary to understand the mysteries of the natural world. Nature was mysteriously in communication with our intimate feelings. And to extract geopoetics from the human spirit is a way to understand that mind and body are instruments of perception, first and foremost. The land as an absolute value is part of an interconnected web of values needed by the greater community to evolve, to move and be moved, to adopt our own poetry as the intangible but powerful vehicle to imagine, explore, walk, observe, perceive, transform any kind of landscape. That's what we do. Anyone who recognizes his or her spot in the land to start using new crops, sniffing different and forgotten essences, walking uncharted routes, because he or she just never took these routes. This is how the geopoet gets inspired. What has been is a silence spurring to travel further. That is the place where the emotional fault line releases incandescent magma that gushes out and that, once cooled down, will become our new forms of expression. To be witnesses and to be makers. Do we really want to postpone? To each his own poem, to each his own geography. Thank you. I'll leave the word now to the real geographers.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very glad to see you all and to know that we have followers online. I would like to take this opportunity to thank very much Gaël for having initiated this exchange. It's a pleasure for me and for the colleagues involved in the Remix Place project to be associated to this initiative. So thank you very much for this opportunity to open as well this project, Remix Place, with you. We are also starting our work currently. We are very pleased to have the opportunity to work and to exchange with you, Davide. Your talk has been very inspiring, and this photosynthesis reference you made is actually very intriguing. And I think there are a lot of connections with what we are trying to do. So I'm looking forward to the exchanges we will have in the coming days. For us, capturing, understanding emotions is felt in a place, helps to understand why and how we act in place, how it sets motion. So turning to our project Remix Place, we are interested in understanding the embedded experience of place, how it provides meaning and drives action in place. So I would like to start really coming into the region with the fieldwork that we have started already a couple of days ago. The picture doesn't fit with what is on the screen here. That is just a... Yeah, great. So here we are. Right. So I'd like to bring you to Villerue. It's it's just across the border, if you cross the border from Luxembourg, and to bring you with an interview we conducted in Villerue. One of our interviewees, we had a 2 hours interview, and the interviewee brought us at the very end to this very specific place. And it looks like I'm guessing you and probably we wouldn't have we wouldn't have stopped at this place, but for him it was a very iconic place. He said this is the place where actually I've been living for many years, and he was saying this street is a dead end. Actually, it's an impasse, and therefore there was life in this place. At that time, when he was living there was no television, so everyone took their chairs, and when the weather was nice, people were sitting outside. So the kids played outside with their mothers, and of course the fathers were at the factory at that time. So there was his mother, his grandmother as well, who was living, he was saying, just across the road. And he was saying, there was my grandmother who lived in the second house there, and with my grandmother I have culinary memories. On special days, she would make the polenta, and of course she had a stick to avoid the lamps, and turned it clockwise in a H shape. So once it was cooked, at the bottom of the pan, there was a small crust, a galette, and she used to give it to us as a children. And so he was bringing us in this back in the 50s, in the life of the 50s in Villerue. It's a kind of a multi-sensorial quotation, if you want, of this community of workers in the industrial town of Villerue. You have to imagine a couple of meters away at walking distance, there are the high furnaces with the noise, with, of course, the smell of the whole industrial process. And there was a factory of 4,000 people working there. So, of course, all their families were living in the neighborhood here. And, of course, this multi-sensorial quotation comes very much in contrast with the current situation of this this place. You see the former house where he was living has been actually bricked up, and it faces a newly renovated house, which has been put back to the standards of today, while retaining their character. So this is one of the facets of a wide range state-led planning development initiative, which has been launched 10 years ago. This process here of rebuilding new houses in this municipality. So it's a process which was launched by the French state, and at that time, of course, when our interviewee was living in his community, of course, workers were coming from everywhere in Europe. They were also coming from Maghreb. They were coming from Italy, from Poland, to work, of course, in the industry. And of course, this contrasts very much with the situation of today, where those buildings here, these former mining houses, have been reconverted to welcome actually communities from Luxembourg moving to the French side, because the housing prices are much lower, and actually, essentially, most of the people living in these buildings here currently are coming from a Portuguese community. So you see the mixed communities, the mixed experiences that are in this neighborhood. And so we see very much currently that the development in this region is largely shaped by that of Luxembourg's economy. And of course, Luxembourg's economy has grown steadily over the past 2 to 3 decades. Cross-border interdependencies have intensified and diversified. And there have been, of course, an expanding number of commuters. It is the most visible aspect of the much more complex process of cross-border metropolization, which actually calls for a form of cross-border governance, which remains very weak, actually. Currently, there are discussions for developing a form of co-development, developing common infrastructures, common housing policy, etc., affordable housing. All this development is currently undergoing, and it's rather preliminary. Beyond these functional challenges, beyond I see. It looks like it's connected with this computer rather than. Let me check. Voilà. So the development of it was it's actually what I was trying to exemplify. So the development of Luxembourg brings as well important constructions on the other side of the border, and this is one of the examples of how the EPA Alzette Belval is currently also constructing on the French side to accommodate actually workers, students who are actually looking for accommodation on the other side of the border. Beyond this functional and governance challenges, the Alzette Belval cross-border area also shares a similar landscape. And for example, there is this, of course, the environmental legacy of the mining industry. And you see here 2 examples of 2 different places along the border, across the border, in France and Luxembourg. And of course, both sides have the common challenge to protect unique biotopes. In fact, this region is so tied together from an historical, societal, linguistic, environmental, cultural, political dimensions that this independent magazine Forum has entitled one of its recent dossiers, Terre Rouge, or Terre Commune, sorry, Terre Commune. And Terre Commune was actually a term which has been coined to actually reflect a joint governance of two counties, the county of Luxembourg and the county of Bar, a long time ago. So Terre Commune, this dossier was actually calling for a tailor-made governance in capacity to apprehend the complexity of this territory. Given all this deep transformation in this cross-border area, we are interested with the Remix Place project to observe how people relate to these transformations. How would they actually like to see this region evolving? Who is associated to this transformation? Who is actually not associated to them? So the project or these questioning relate actually to two assumptions that we have. First of all, research has demonstrated over the last decade that planning projects, be they of large or small extent, are more likely to be accepted if people have been informed and associated to them. People are more likely to use public equipment if these meet communities' usages and expectations. Also, as a second point, in a multicultural, multilingual region characterized with in and out migration, it is essential to question and to understand what drives attachment to place. What is that gives a person the feeling to belong, to be attached to a specific place, to be allowed to belong in a specific place. So we try to understand this notion of attachment to place, and we understand it as a driver to public participation. We intend with this project to investigate what drives this attachment to place in this complex cross-border area full of multifaceted processes. So with attachment to place, we understand the feeling of being part, of being part of one neighborhood, and a sense of rootedness in the community. Here, emotional bonds with the neighborhood are products and not of individual internal processes, but also external social processes. So capturing the significance of place is a rather complex endeavor. It is tied to exploring how people experience it, how our interviewee in Villeroy experienced it. It informs very much what this place means to this community. What does it drive, and how this actually moves as well the geography then. So it requires researchers to conduct a form of immersive fieldwork and to be receptive to what can be expressed, what can't be expressed, and to different modes of expressions. They can be, of course, corporal, they can be behavioral, and of course they are very connected to our emotions. These expressions evolve in time and they evolve in space, so they are extremely difficult to grasp. Yet we aim at capturing a glimpse of what is true to this form of complexity in this region, and therefore we position, or our positioning rests on several theoretical, epistemological, and ethical consideration, which Lise will introduce you to. So we, in a minute. Here we are. So it's going to use this one, right?
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Estelle, David, Egel, everyone. I would just... Yeah, I want to say a word about the epistemological frame on some theory, because as Estelle just said, Remix Place project is interested in personal stories of attachment to places, interested in the micro scales you see in the street, for example, and to multiple sensoriality. Well, I must say this can be surprising. If you remember what is geography in high school, for example, you might be surprised that we are interested in this as a geographer. But human geography is in the process of undergoing changes that facilitate this type of approach and admits that our connection to space is constructed as a relationship with the universe of meaning. So I guess Davide told you this more or less as a geopoet. I will try to say this as a, let's say, a geographer academic. Because actually we are living a turn into the geographical approach that allow us to consider body and emotion as through paths for knowledge. This is the result of a cross-disciplinary connection, and I must say that the post-colonial studies, the gender studies, the feminist epistemology, and also the performance studies has helped a lot to broaden and diversify the geography competencies. Among them, among these changes, one subtopic is worth mentioning. It is the emotional geography, or sometimes geography of emotion, or even in French, géographie des émotions. So we have to discuss about the exact title. But emotional geography has developed over the last 10 years, maximum, and we can qualify it as a real turn because it renews the way of doing sciences. Indeed, emotion has always been our interface with the world. We experience reality through our emotion. But at the same time, the emotion has long been associated with irrationality, subjectivity, let's say with weakness, even something unspeakable or something not able to be shared, right? So emotion are actually at the opposite of positive sciences criterion, which promote rationality and objectivity. So being interested by emotion in a social or geographical way allows us to accept that emotion are at the very basis of our cognition, our movement, our psychology, and even our action, actually. So in this way, social sciences might not prevent itself from investigating the diverse subjectivities that rules our realities. This is why I think emotional geography is kind of revolutionary, because it's not just a new object for geography, it is also a new perspective in what is a scientific approach. And emotional geography goes beyond the border between rational and non-rational. So now, what is concretely studied in the emotional geography? I must say that emotional geography is not only interested to study strong and spectacular emotion like a fear or joy or exceptional event, but also to investigate emotion that we have in everyday life. So we try to figure out what's set up in motion, why we feel good or bad in such specific place, and find how emotion, identity, and place are really connected in the same in the same thing. Emotions are really diverse, and if we have the chance to have this walk in Belval, I'm sure we'll see that our scope of emotion will be considerable, right? But at the same time, emotions are very personal, but they are also socially built. Our culture and our history give us preferences. So it's important to say for me that emotional geography might be seen as a study relying on individuals, but also relying on social groups. Saying this, I believe emotional geography has a great potential. Nonetheless, there is a problematic issue that Estelle started to introduce. What kind of methodology are available to collect emotion, for example? Methodology is indeed the challenging part of this academic work. How to investigate and intimate on moving frame. How to be sure that we can understand the emotion of someone else. How to map them, how to represent them, how to collect concrete data. These are some questions we want to address in the Remix Place project. Among our experimental approaches, we are working in what we call interview in situ. So you have some example here. Inspired by qualitative methodology of geography, our team goes on the fieldwork since a month to meet people and record their stories. The original process, to my mind, is that we ask people to choose a place they feel attached to or they have specific emotion with these places. Then we meet people from France or Luxembourg by going into the place they selected. Thanks to this, we slowly elaborate a regional geography of places that matter according to interviewees. So this is a place-based approach, and it allows us to open our eyes and our affect to places we would not have discovered by ourselves. Secondly, we want to experiment the fieldwork in a more artistic perspective. I'm sorry, the quality of the picture is not so good. But as the Remix Place is a new and just starting program, I want to illustrate this possibility of artistic perspective thanks to another fieldwork that I have done the few last years in Nepal. Here you can see a group of women of Silubari, a little village of the south of the Annapurna. I was in a collaboration with a Nepali actress, and I started to build some group of theater. What we call community theater is a mix of techniques on body language that are really accessible for everyone. The aim is to gather a group in a place and explore by very simple games the narrative of the self. And little by little, the group starts to be confident and find its own way to express. So it can be dancing, it can be using silence, it can be taking a posture, it can be moving the space with a specific intention. All of this way is producing geographical knowledge, actually. In the same idea, emotional geography can use the tool of photo language. You have here on the left a picture of children inventing a story coming from their interpretation of an image, a drawing actually. And of course, fictional story says a lot and even more about who you are or how you feel. On the right side, you have an example of another group building what we call a mental map or an emotional map. The objective here is not to map, the objective here is to map the world as we live it. So the idea is not to be exact on the proportion of scale, but on the contrary, to restore the place as we live it with all the contrasts we experience. These artistic techniques can include also sensitive work or even performing answer in the public space, like I do sometimes with a company, a theater company in Grenoble. I would say the common point of these techniques I'm just explaining you, it's to look for a sensitive relation to the space and create a debate and share our subjective knowledge. By this, I believe emotional geography is an empowering process because knowledge is no longer the property or the privilege of academic and researcher, but it's a common capacity to question our relation to space. So this is why Remix Place is a collective of 7 people coming from different backgrounds. So you already know Estelle and me. I just quickly present you François Martin, which is a sound artist, David Chayol, which is a sociologue and also photographer who will have the pleasure to welcome in September, Nathalie Blo, which belongs to the theater study, Koku Nonoa, which is here also today, a postdoctoral in the theater study. And we are at the beginning of the process, and we aim to have both, at the end of the Remix Place project, we aim to cross actually some academic results because we will publish some articles, right? But we also want to have some artistic form, and we plan to have an exhibition with maybe mental maps, writing, and so on, and also a documentary play. So we hope that some people on the region accept to be actress or actor for the theater play. So we want to combine with the same fieldwork what we can do in an academic way and a more artistic way. We are at the beginning of the process, so I think it's useless to try to conclude this conference or this project. We rather want to start a discussion with you and to share our experimental approach to nourish this epistemological turn. And I'm really glad that we have the opportunity today and for the years coming to cross our techniques. Thank you, and I guess we have maybe a time of discussion all together.